Welcome everyone to another Calvary Conversations. I'm your host for today, Joshua Paxton, Director of the Burnham Center for Global Engagement at Calvary University and Associate Professor of Intercultural Studies. And today I am joined by the one, the only, the great, the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Hange, who is English and Education faculty here at Calvary. He is also our TESOL Studies coordinator.
Yes.
He didn't give this to me, but he began our international student program as well. He launched that. He is married. He has 4 children, 2 who are adopted from Russia. One of those, Alicia, is a Calvary grad and also a teacher now in Kansas City. And he and his wife were educational missionaries in Russia for 8 years. Welcome,
Yes.
Tim.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. Looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Tim and I go way back. We went to the same church for a long time. We were part of missions mentoring small group together, and so we've known each other for many years. So Tim, as an educational missionary in Russia, you were involved in a lot of aspects of cross-cultural leadership. Your
Yes.
latest, maybe you could tell everybody what your latest role was before you guys came back to the States.
Yeah. So the last role that I had, actually, I spent 3 years as the head of school of an international Christian school in Moscow, which was a very hard environment to be in terms of being a Christian school. So in that environment, I led a group of about 35 teachers and staff members from the United States, Russia, Korea, Cameroon, Ireland, Uzbekistan. So it was really a rather diverse group of people. I also, though, cut my teeth in leadership fairly early on in my second year. I was asked to lead a language institute that a Christian institute was starting, and it wasn't a Christian program per se, but it was a means of relationship building. And so, yeah, we got that off the ground. I'm pleased to say that actually, though it spun off to a different organization, is still going today. Yeah, I guess all in all, of those 8 years, 5 were spent in leadership of cross-cultural leadership. Yeah.
And with multiple different cultures. I mean,
Yes.
very.
That's something I had
diverse
not
setting.
really planned for. I had really put a lot of effort into preparing myself to serve Russian people, and so in learning the language and in learning that culture. But boy, I was really not prepared. Half of our students, by the way, at this Christian school were from Korea, and so
Wow.
dealing with Korean families was something that was, and the culture and the mindset was a very new and different thing for me as well. So
I just real quick, what were some of the nuances of like Russian culture compared with Korean culture?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So yeah, there are definitely some areas of overlap, but there are some areas of difference too. Korea has more of a sense of like of as is common in many Asian countries. This of face, and they talk about it a lot. Of there is sort of this honor and shame approach. So Koreans would often guard their words a lot more. In terms of and be a bit more roundabout. Russians tend to be very direct, and they respect directness, and so that was a big issue too, just in terms of communication and synchronizing that. So yeah,
and so you have in your position as a leader, you now have to deal with a context where you're presented with 2 different cultural ways. Like maybe say 2 different cultural ways of handling conflict, for example.
Oh yeah.
As a leader, and how to bring about Right. How to bring about amiable solutions in that context. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. We had our share of
So
conflicts like any community. So,
oh
uh,
yes, we can be honest about that, right? We can
mhm.
be honest about that. So so what was it, just generally speaking, what was it like to be in that position of cross-cultural leadership, leading a diverse faculty?
Um, you constantly have to have your ambassador hat on, and you constantly have to have your ears open to listen. Um, when incidents occurred, you had to just really put yourself in the mindset and mode of, you know, not only not allowing yourself to get upset, not allowing the adrenaline to rise, but to do the exact opposite and to step back from it and say, okay, this is a situation. It's an interesting situation. And we're going to get people together and we're going to figure out a solution and not rushing quickly, giving other sides a listen instead of jumping to conclusions. And that I mean, a lot of cross-cultural savvy, I think, just has to do with listening and being willing to see things from other people's perspectives. Um,
Yes.
it may seem silly or foolish to you that somebody got offended over something so small, but it's not small to them, and there are
Yes.
reasons why it's not small. And conversely, there are things that I might have gotten offended at that they might consider not a big deal. Um, our Russian teachers, when they came in to teach Russian classes, would get very offended when students would just rush by them in the morning. In Russian schools, unacceptable. Good morning, Mrs. Tamara Leonidovna. Good morning, Mrs. Katya Semyonova. You had to show and demonstrate that kind of respect. Well, our American students aren't used to this. They're just rushing, and there's
Yeah.
nothing meant. It's not that disrespect was meant, but it led to some really good conversations, cross-cultural conversations with these students living in Russia, saying, let's, we can say, oh, that's silly, oh, that's different, or we can put ourselves in other person's shoes and uh, and see things from their perspective and see things from that mindset. And is it really so difficult a thing to wish somebody good morning when you see them? So this is these are just like some small examples of the kinds of things that we would encounter.
I'm reminded in cross-cultural situations, I'm reminded of an old country song quite frequently that went, you start walking your way and I'll start walking mine. We'll meet in the middle of, so it just,
Hmm.
there's a lot of truth to that. So
Yep.
so what were some of the benefits and what were some of the tensions of leading a diverse faculty?
So um, I always when I often when I teach about language and culture, because I teach a class for that as part of our TESOL program. By the way, for those who don't know, TESOL is teaching English to speakers of other languages.
Thank you.
But we do a bit of cross-cultural work in that as well. I draw a Venn diagram, two concentric circles, and I show like our culture, kingdom of heaven culture, and then there's some intersection, right?
Hmm.
There's some intersection where our culture exhibits some things that are very redeemed, and then there are a lot of aspects of our culture that are very worldly, and even our secular culture can exhibit like values that are godly.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and of course, we would expect that or hope that within church culture that would be broader, right? You'd see a bigger
Yes.
intersection of those two circles. Each culture is going to intersect at different points. So, what was really great was learning from the expressions of Christianity from other cultures. And I will tell you, it's very
Yes.
humbling. And I learned very quickly, too. I think it's very important, and maybe this is digressing a bit, but I'll get right back, that when you come into a different culture, not to take a power over, my way is better approach, but to
Yes.
take a serve under and operate as one of my missions trainers in my training taught me this, and it stuck with me my entire time. Begin with the assumption that their way of thinking is at least as valid as your own.
Amen.
Begin with
Yes.
the assumption that you have something to learn.
Yes.
So probably if you're wanting to look at the best of that, I can tell it to you in one story. And I'll give his name, Tamaz, who's a wonderful Christian man who was our facilities director, or the facilities and grounds director. He would often come into my office to pray. And one time, as we were praying, before we prayed, he shared something that happened to him that was incredibly unjust.
Mm.
And I remember just looking at him and saying, and I was watching his faith in God be so strong at this moment. And without sharing the story, I just said, Tamaz, I'm really shocked that none of this makes you question God and his purpose.
Mm.
He looked at me with utter shock. And he said, why would I do that?
Yeah.
I said, because, it's a very, in our culture, it's a very American thing to do. We think of God, you were in control of the situation. Why did you allow it to happen? He shook his head. He goes, wow, if I took that approach, I would lose my relationship with God and I'd go through the suffering.
Yeah.
It'd be terrible. Why would I sever the relationship by doubting the very one who supports me and sustains me? You see how there is a trust there, and a lack of a less transactional approach to faith,
Yes.
right, than we
Yes.
have here in the West. So I was able to learn things from that, and all of us were doing that, frankly. It was really great to learn from the different expressions of the things that are, especially within our church cultures, we were getting right. And you almost felt like you were now you now had this Venn diagram with multiple circles, and there was a larger intersection, and
Yes.
that part was really cool. I admit it was
Yeah.
really neat to see.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Tensions.
Oh, tensions. A lot of them had to do with leadership styles, honestly.
Sure.
I was in a situation, so I'll be careful in case I was in a situation where I was in leadership, and I was told, Tim, by my Russian advisor, Tim, you need to be harder on the Russian staff.
Mm.
Why? And they said they don't respond to the kind of leadership you're giving. And the kind of leadership I was giving was, listening, being open, trying to be a servant leader. And they said, no, this is not a culture where servant leadership is a thing. This is a culture where you rule with a fist. And if you don't do that, people won't respect you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was difficult for me to work through. And I had to learn a balance of coming across as authoritative, but still listening, still still gaining input, and where appropriate, still being friendly, but not being overly informal, which was in that culture, which is a tension, because there's a great deal of formal distance in Russian culture. So that's just one example. But I remember just sitting at my desk thinking, how in the world do I balance what Scripture says about servant leadership with this cultural reality?
Sure.
And yeah, that made it quite hard.
Yeah, and so that's the difference between a Western low power distance culture where you may be the leader, but you're still equal to me, versus a high power distance culture where you are the leader and I need to respect your position of leadership. Yes.
Yep.
So how have you grown both as a leader and personally through your interaction with those of other cultures? You mentioned one already with illustration there.
That was a huge spiritual growth point for me, actually, to start being less transactional in my faith. I also grew, it was great going to a Russian church and being underneath a Russian pastor, and sort of really just not sort of, but being in a position to where I'm submitting to that authority, and to learn from that, and to there is a degree of humility that you learn from that, I guess. Also, just it was really, I think, great for me personally from the standpoint of learning what it means to love my neighbor, because I constantly had to be in the position of thinking, how does this person view this?
Hmm.
How, from what perspective did they just interpret this situation? And I think we need to do more of that in our own culture here. And I'm
Absolutely.
not saying I'm perfect at it by no means,
Yeah.
but
No.
I do think that it enabled me
Bro.
to gain a better sense of being able to put myself in someone else's position and interpret situations and interpret life without jumping to judgment or without jumping to judgmental sort of conclusions about their thoughts or their behaviors. So
Yeah.
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 Uh,
Awesome. So, All right, in 20 seconds, what advice would you give for those who are in or are entering a cross-cultural leadership situation?
uh, wow. I'm tempted to say what Donald Snow says in his book English Teaching is Christian Mission, that if he had 5 years to prepare before going into a culture, and he had one thing that he would do, it would be to learn the language. If he had 3 years, the one thing that he would do would be to learn the language. If he had 1 year or even 2 weeks, the one thing that he would do would be to learn the local language. And what I'm saying is, I realize not everybody is gifted at learning
By
languages,
the
but
way, you have plenty of time. I was misreading my clock over here. Yeah.
oh, okay, good, good.
I was
Well,
misreading my clock.
no problem, no problem. But I do think, well, that gives me a little bit of room to answer some other things too. But I
Yeah.
do think that if you're really going, especially if you're going long term into a culture, making the effort to learn the language is huge. And I realize not everybody's gifted in that way linguistically, but we could have conversations about that because I actually don't think that. I think that it has more to do with uh, commitment to learning and your methods of learning than it does with inherent talent. But anyway, that's a different issue. But here's what it does: when you learn a language, you don't just learn a language; you learn a mentality.
Hmm.
The language expresses the way that the people in that culture think. For instance,
Yes.
Russian expresses in the dative, which okay, uh, to me it is cold. Cold is pressing itself upon me, is the way that you would say I am cold. In other
Hmm.
words, you are not in control of that feeling. That feeling is happening to you, and it's very much in line with the Russian ideas of fate, that we
Yeah.
can't control our emotions, we can't control how we feel. These things just happen to us. We're sort of at the whims of fate. Okay, it's not always, that doesn't always lay itself out well, but at least you understand the mentality a bit when you're using that language. It's one of many examples. So I do think like learning that language and learning the culture of spending a lot of time in and learning that cultural perspective. I think too, one thing that we did for years before we went actually over to work full time, we engaged with Russian people here in Kansas City. We engaged with short term trips that familiarized ourselves with a lot of the kind. So when we hit the ground in full time ministry, it wasn't a surprise to us. We were pretty prepared in terms of how to deal with this culture, and
Similarly, let me piggyback on that. So similarly in English, it's impossible to say something without a verb. You
right,
you have to have an action in order for it to be a complete sentence, and that betrays a mentality within our culture, which is that in order to exist, you must do.
hmm
And so, you can just let your mind wander on all the different ramifications of what that means for our culture, that there must be action for something to really exist. And it's
right.
inherent within our language.
Right. Yep. Yep. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of other things. I do think that don't be too a lot of people who go cross culturally are do so through organizations that train them well ahead of time.
Mhm.
We accepted teachers, and they did not always go through training to come to us. And
Mhm.
so if you're going cross culture, like
Sure.
in a business as missions or a teacher role, and you're considering doing something overseas, but you've never had any specific cross cultural training, I would really advise you to consider getting some. We did a 3-week training, and I'm not here to plug them per se, but it happened to be with an organization called Missions Training International.
Sure.
It was 3 of the most impactful. Here it is, what, 11 years later, and I still remember. I mean, almost to the day, the lessons we learned in that training. They were so impactful and so valuable to me. All of that would come back to me in my life in Moscow when I was, facing all of those things that they described. I was able to sort of step back from that and say, aha, this is not uncommon. This happens, and this is how I should respond. So yes, research, preparation. David Livermore talks about this in his book Emotional Intelligence. That
Use that book in class.
culture was it? Sorry, not emotional. Cultural intelligence. Cultural intelligence, right? Yeah, the book that talks about your CQ,
Mhm.
but he
Yeah,
talks about how
CQ.
people
He
who have
compares it with IQ. Yeah.
right, right. He talks about who people who have high cultural intelligence do a great deal of rehearsing before they go into situations. I would do that, by the way. I
Yeah.
would like before I would have an encounter, I would think, especially if I had to speak Russian in that encounter, I would rehearse. I mean, I probably look crazy because in Moscow you walk everywhere, and I would be muttering to myself on the street in Russian, rehearsing potential conversations and ways I would respond if this conversation went this way, if this conversation went the other way. Um, like that's another thing to do that I think that really helps in cross cultural situations.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. We use that book in the cross-cultural communication class. And so I have they actually have a assessment that coincides with it. And I have the students take that assessment both before the class, and then we go through the class and we take it again after the class. And then it's always fun. It's always fun to look at these they break it down into 4 different elements and see where each one of us falls. And so it's especially fun when there are students in that class who are from different cultural backgrounds.
yeah,
And then you get to see
yeah.
where somebody falls on one of these different elements and compare it with somebody of a different cultural background. It's a lot of fun.
One of the things I've noticed, and uh, we have a little bit more time here, right? I think.
Yes, we do. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
One of the things I've
I was
noticed
watching I was neglecting. I forgot when I started my clock. Yes, we have more time.
is that there are. I could probably categorize it into 3 kinds of people. Is it 3? That if you were to categorize how you interact cross culturally,
Mhm.
so we would get people who came from the states primarily to serve at our school, and I would notice these. The first is, oh, my way's better. Like
Mhm. Yeah.
Americans just we do this better. We're the nation of education. We know this stuff. We're here to teach you, Russians and Koreans how it's done, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. The second one is that says, "Oh, no, 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 no. I I I'm here to listen to your point of view. I desire to be a balanced person, to listen to your point of view, uh to value your culture, etc." Okay? The
Hmm.
third kind of person is the person who says what the last person said, but not really.
Not really.
Right?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
we just give lip service to, no, we value your culture, but listen to my way of doing it.
Hmm. Yes.
Well, you don't really value the culture if in the end your way will always supersede. There actually was a fourth category, and we saw this happen sometimes, where a person would come to the culture and value that culture and denigrate their home culture. And that's
Hmm.
not healthy either.
Yes.
And if you want to know which person I am, I have been all four.
Hmm. Yeah. Because we go
And
through stages.
right, we do.
Yeah.
And there were times when my wife and I looked at each other and we said we never want to go live in the States again. Like we never want to deal with that because
Yeah.
but you come around and you realize, okay, no, again, it goes back to those concentric circles. You may know the junk in your own culture, and so you tend to, so anyway, that's just
and that's a component of developing interculturality, okay, which is the ability to interact and adapt to relationships with people of other cultures while still functioning within your own as well.
Yes.
So how has, on that note, and we really do only have like 30 seconds now, but how has your experience with other cultures and leadership in other cultures helped you in interacting with people of your own culture?
Yes, it's a little difficult to nail down my own culture, but if we're talking American,
It's true.
because
Okay.
I
Yes.
come from an immigrant family,
Western
right?
American,
So
Middle Eastern, Missouri.
But if you're talking about American culture, here's what I almost wish I'd said this in the very beginning. Do not ignore cross-cultural training thinking that it doesn't apply to you because you live and serve in this culture here in America. And I would say, what culture?
Yeah, exactly.
White suburban culture, inner city culture, affluent culture, poverty culture, not to mention a lot of the areas in the United States that have their own unique cultural features.
Midwest, Southern, Northern, Californian, yeah.
In some ways, and here's another one. How much do you understand about the mindset of somebody who's grown up in a completely secular culture? Like,
yes,
for Christians who've grown up in the church, understanding somebody who went to public school growing up, didn't come from a Christian family, steeped in naturalism as fact. Like, how do you mentally relate?
Have intelligent conversation,
right? And I think that actually leads to a lot of. I think a lazy way of dealing with that is taking extreme positions, tribing up, and I'm not going to get off on that discussion, but
yeah, we've run out of time.
We've run out of time.
You and I will do this some more. We will have more conversations like this because it's so incredibly important.
But in finality, if you wouldn't mind me just saying this closing thing here,
go for it.
In finality, know that you need cross-cultural savvy to be an effective witness in your own culture now.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, because there are one of my favorite terms is the nuances. All right, that word, the nuances that even within your own culture, if you don't have some level of cross-cultural skills, you're going to miss the nuances of what somebody else is doing. So, amen.
Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciated
thank you, Tim.
Here.
Thank you for doing this and being here. I am sure we will probably have a lot more interactions as we continue with Calvary Conversations. So thank you, and God bless everybody.
God bless. See you.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Calvary Conversations, a service of Calvary University in Kansas City, Missouri. We invite you to participate in the conversation by contacting us through the Calvary University website, calvary.edu, or by calling us at 816-322-0110. Join us again next week for another Calvary Conversation.